the cutoff's always been on private and public land, 1 p.m. hunting. But now on private land this year, you can go all day. There's been so many birds that have been saved by that 1 p.m., like 1 o'clock hits, you end, and the turkey lives to see another day. So a lot of people have it in their mind by extending that, it's going to just annihilate the turkey population. What's the thought process that goes into that type of change?
There's quite a bit that goes into it, right? So the first thing I'll say is...
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild Podcast. That didn't take long. You're already popping a top, dude.
Sorry. You're Tim Shelswick.
You're Matt Drury, fully caffeinated.
That's right. And we're getting ready for some turkey talk.
I can't wait.
It's that time of season. Last year, we did a deep dive. We had the Longbeard Legend series. So we're in some early stages of planning for that. So hopefully we'll get a cool series rolling for the spring. But to kind of kick it off, we're going to be talking turkey today with the MDC.
Yeah, we got Jason Sumners, the Deputy Director of the Missouri Department of Conservation. Jason, how are you this morning?
I'm great. Happy to be here, guys.
Thanks, Jason.
And then we got Nick Oakley, the turkey biologist for the MDC. How are you, Nick?
I'm doing all right. Thanks, fellas, for having us on.
I can't think of two more qualified guys to have on to talk not only about the state of turkeys in Missouri, but also there's some new regulations that we want to talk about. And what the impacts could be for not only hunters, but also the turkey population.
Yeah, and I think overall, obviously we have listeners all over the country, but, I think you can gain something, even if you're hunting in Missouri or not. I think you can gain something out of this. Nicholas has, a very good grasp of what's going on with the wild turkey. So I think in general, you'll find the episode pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's right. And also... turkey hunting in general just tends to be a very personalized thing. We all localize our, or I guess extrapolate our experience based on what we've seen last season.
On your farm, on your lease, on your property, or wherever you hunt, which is, probably not fair.
Exactly, yeah. So I think we're probably going to get some of our perspectives tempered a little bit with some of the data from the guys.
Okay, so guys, as we kick this off, because I want to jump into these 2024 regulation changes, but before we jump into that, how's the state of the wild turkey? What's your thoughts in general?
Yeah, so I think here in Missouri, things have stabilized. Certainly, we've seen declines since kind of those peaks back in the mid 2000s. If people think back on that as the glory days of turkey hunting in Missouri, certainly, and the harvest numbers would bear that out. We had a few bad years of really poor production in Missouri. And as a result, the harvest declined for several years there, starting in about 2016 and running through about 2020, 2022, something in there. The last couple of years, we've had decent production. And then last year in particular, we had very good production. The best production, compared to a 20-year average across the state for like 20 years in most of the regions of the state. So very good production. As a result, we expect to see turkey numbers bounce back. Harvest in 2023 was up a little over 20%, which is always good to see. I'd say the population of Missouri is stabilized and we're kind of primed for a bit of a rebound.
That's great to hear. That's exciting to hear, frankly, for a turkey lover. That's what you want to hear. What I think some of the concern from your consumer, the people buying the tags, would be in regards to, okay, if we're stabilizing by some of these regulations, does that hurt the stabilization? Does it kind of have an opposite effect? So for instance, I think we're in Missouri on private land. The cutoff's always been on private and public land, 1 p.m. hunting. But now on private land this year, you can go all day. Now, I know personally, just as this very anecdotal, there's been so many birds that have been saved by that 1 p.m. Like you see it and you're calling to them and you're looking at your phone. And it's like, it's 12:58, it's 12:59, 1 o'clock hits, you end, and the turkey lives to see another day. So a lot of people have it in their mind by extending that, it's going to just annihilate the turkey population. What's the thought process that goes into that type of change? And I know it's all day huntings in several other states, so it's not like it's some foreign concept.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. there's quite a bit that goes into it, right? So the first thing I'll say is looking at other states. That was one of the things we did pretty early, is just see what other states have made the change, right? So Indiana went from a half day to an all day season. Ohio, Virginia, these are states that have made those changes, and they saw that their harvest did increase a bit, about 10% ish on average across those states. Now you can't really necessarily put all that on the regulation change, right? So I just said last year our harvest increased by 20% without a regulation change. In 2020, when everyone was home from COVID, and we saw a big spike in users out there in the woods, we saw our harvest increase by about 7%. So there's a lot that goes into that, weather being a primary component of that, certainly. But overall, Missouri, the way we've timed our season as far as the structure goes, we're after the peak and breeding season. And what that really means is that most of the gobblers out there are kind of redundant, right? The biology of the turkey is such that only a few of the adult gobblers actually do the majority or even the vast majority of the breeding. So by removing some percentage of those after the breeding season it's not largely wrapped up, but is on the decline, we're kind of insulated from any real big negative effects from a little bit of an increase in harvest.
I'd add to that, the scenario that plays out too in that situation, Matt, is that many turkey hunters will watch that turkey go to roost, and where they're going to be sitting in the morning.
Yeah.
Right? And so this idea that, yes, they are safe for some temporary period of time doesn't mean that they wouldn't ultimately be harvested. Right. And so the question is how much does it add? I think one of the bigger concerns that we hear from the hunting public is just the perception that the increased pressure on the birds that can happen from, an additional half a day of hunting will somehow affect their gobbling activity, might push them, off private land to another, a neighboring landowner or whatever, where they become, inaccessible to the hunter. And so I think that's where we kind of are. But, when you look at our general regulations, we got 3 weeks. The challenges with turkeys gobbling out and stuff like that we hear about hunters from the South are talking about 6 week plus kinds of seasons where they're starting to shoot turkeys before the peak of breeding, and they are probably getting pressured pretty hard. And they got really liberal black bag limits. Our 3 week season timed after the peak of breeding and a 2-bird bag limit is still, when you look across the spectrum, it's the really conservative approach that most states are going to. So us adding additional, hours in the day, while some perceive it as a pretty significant liberalization, I don't think we have the data that would suggest that it's going to massively increase harvest, massively increase pressure on our turkey population. But it's going to provide hunters a lot of extra opportunity to get out there and chase them.
Yeah, so that's the plus side, right? Like part of what I've read over and over is, hey, the young, youth hunters, the students, the kids that are in school that, wouldn't have otherwise been able to unless they, played hooky.
The people who are bad at turkey hunting.
The people who are bad at turkey hunting.
Need more time.
People that work, 9 to 5 jobs and can't get off, so that's the positive side. And I've seen several guys that are saying, hey, selfishly, I love this new regulation. I'm going to be able to hunt more. I've always wanted to hunt all day, or I've hunted in Iowa and that's all day, or whatever other state that they've hunted. And so they like it, but they've also kind of like with a footnote of, but I hope this doesn't mess up the turkey population.
I think we're all a little
worse.
nervous. Yeah. But
I think we all get that, right? I think we so appreciate the quality of the hunting that we do have here in Missouri, and I think folks are, rightfully so, very protective of that and don't want to do anything that jeopardizes it. And I'm the first one to say I don't want to be doing anything that jeopardizes it. But yeah, to your point, I had that conversation with my son, my 9-year-old son. He's starting to get crazy about chasing turkeys, and I said, "We going this spring?" He's like, "Yep, but I don't want to get up really early in the morning." Right. So I might be able to get him up early a couple mornings, but we also are likely going to be able to spot a bird over on the hill, right, and put the sneak on them. And just that, we just see declining hunters. We see all of these increased conflicts with opportunity. Nick's got the numbers. I think we're down, 15%. in the last few years in terms of our total number of turkey hunters, and we're not retaining the ones that we have at the same rate. And so it's time for us to ask that serious, hard question: are our regulations standing in the way of folks participating in turkey hunting, especially if we have no evidence to suggest that it's going to negatively impact the population?
Yeah. So if the hunter, the number is in decline in regards to hunters, but yet we had a highest, turkey kill count since 2016. How's that work? Is it that more guys are successful, or less people hunting, but they're more successful hunting? Or how's that data playing out?
Yeah, so kind of along those lines, right? We track hunter effort through our survey, right? So we measure how many trips hunters take, and so we're able to cross that with the number of birds harvested. And the 2023 hunter effort measure was the highest since 2004, right? When we were at our peak. So I think that there are fewer hunters. Hunters are a little more successful, but I think that does point to the fact that the population has rebounded some. Certainly.
What do you guys
we had
see?
absolutely incredible weather last spring.
Yeah, unquestionable.
Makes a big difference.
Good and bad, right? Because
Yeah.
that's part of the story here too. We've had 2 years of really dry conditions, and those dry conditions create the ideal brood rearing habitat for those poults that hit the ground to be successful. The other thing that happened, 2 falls ago, is we had that massive acorn crop. I mean, you guys remember that, right? We still had acorns on the ground that turkeys were picking around in the spring, right? So that put the hens in about as absolutely optimal condition last year to raise some massive broods, and I think that's anecdotally certainly we saw much larger brood sizes of turkeys. So I think when we talk about what's the baseline of the population, we are at this baseline level, but now we're going to get environmental conditions that are going to give us these bumps, right? It's going to bump up, and then it's going to level off. It'll bump back up and level off, which is more typical of a well-established population, not this massive growth that we saw through the late 90s and early 2000s.
So in Missouri, we're looking at roughly 400,000 based on your latest studies, I guess, or, models, 400,000 population in 2024. Is that right?
Yeah, give or take. I mean, that's fairly back of the envelope, but that's where we would put it in that range.
So if we're taking out, 40,000, roughly 40,000 birds a year, is that, I mean, how do you guys model that out? When you look out in the future, I mean, how does that affect regulations? When you model out the population and then you factor in the turkey kill number, how does that influence your decision-making process and changing the regulations?
Yeah, population modeling is pretty fun and topic we can spend a lot of time on if you're inclined. That's what I did a lot of my master's work, and I did my TAing and population ecology at University of Wyoming. So I've got some experience. The kind of interesting component about most population models is that we don't take into account males really. Females do all the breeding. We look at things like hen survival and fecundity rates, and that's kind of the baseline of a basic population model. So if hens are surviving and fecundity rates are high, then we see the population increase. If the inverse is true, the population will decline. We are developing a new model, though, which will be a lot more robust and detailed, and it'll actually be broken down into kind of the turkey management regions that we've got laid out. And we will model gobbler survival and abundance and things like that. So there's a lot of good work to be done in that realm, and we're hoping to get that wrapped up in the next couple of years.
And then, Nick, before we jumped on, you were mentioning a bit of good news for the turkey, and that we have that 13-year Cicada hatch that's scheduled for this spring.
Yeah. I was at a Southeast meeting, the Southeast Wild Turkey Working Group meeting last year, and people were talking about it seemed like light bulbs were going off in the room. Like, oh man, we had a cicada hatch in 2012, and our production that year really shot up. And so I went back and looked at our data, and sure enough, whenever we had those good cicada hatches in Missouri, we saw nice spikes in production. And sure enough, 2024, we're gonna have a big, a double brood cicada hatch. So across most of the state, we're gonna have a big cicada hatch, and so I think, yeah, again, it depending on weather, certainly still has an impact. But I think I think we're gonna have a good brood hatch this year. I think it's gonna be another good year.
So with that cicada hatch, does it help, I guess, with nest predation? They're eating the cicadas, a little bit more, and then obviously the turkeys can also pick at all the cicadas. I mean, is that the theory of why it helps?
Yeah, I don't know that anyone has dug into it because there's such long periods of time, right? Science likes to do things 5 years in a row and look at the difference. If your cicada hatches every 13 years, it's hard to put those data together. Those would be the two kind of leading theories, I think, right? One is there's just so much food on the landscape that things like raccoons are eating cicadas, right? I remember the last cicada hatch, my cats were just laying around in the yard just full of cicadas, right? That's the sort of thing you would expect to see. But certainly poults require almost 100% insect diet when from the age that they hatch until they're about a month old. So having all that food has to help them as well, and the hens for that matter.
Yeah, interesting. So going back to the 1 p.m. cutoff on public land staying the same, what's the thought process there? Changing it to, for private, which the data I saw was like 88% of spring turkey harvest is done on private. So what's the thought process for leaving the public land at a 1 p.m. cutoff?
I think when you look at public land use in Missouri and in a lot of places, it gets a great diversity of use during the spring, right? And so we also recognize that, 88% of it happens on private land. That means 12% happens on public land, and only about 7% of Missouri is public land. So there's disproportionately more turkeys killed on public land than there is on private land. So there is, in fact, some increased pressure that exists there. The other side of it is that, private landowners control access to their property. And we hear from many of them, right, that I'm only going to harvest two birds. So they're sort of already having the opportunity to manage and regulate the amount of pressure on their land. But if they want the opportunity to chase turkeys all day, we feel it's reasonable to do that. The other side is, we're attempting to do a lot of habitat management throughout the spring. And so our staff are super, cognizant of trying not to disrupt folks' quality hunting opportunities. And if they're out there trying to implement management practices, whether that's getting a contractor to do habitat work or whatever it might be, trying not to, interfere with that, sacred kind of 3-week period is some of the reasons why. As we continue to, develop better tools to understand what public use on our conservation areas actually looks like, how disruptive it might be, I think we'll certainly entertain that option into the future.
Sure. Some of the other changes you guys made. So fall archery and firearm turkey hunters now have to purchase the fall turkey permit. It used to automatically be included with your archery deer permit when you purchase that. So that's a change. But you also changed the bag limit in the fall. It was four bird limit, and now it's down to 2. And it used to be either sex, right? Without a beard requirement, but now it has to have a beard. Is that right?
No, the fall is still any sex. There's no beard limitation.
Okay. All right. So what's the thought process in changing the fall totals? Because really looking at the numbers from like last year, it's a much smaller, like 10% of the overall harvest were fall harvest or something like that. Is that correct?
Yep, that's about right. Yeah, this fall, I think we shot just over 5,000 birds, but combined between the two seasons. So yeah, about 10% of the harvest. The thought process there is that a bag limit of 4, while most people don't take advantage or have an opportunity to harvest 4 turkeys, there are certainly folks that do. And so that that it's focused, right? So if your neighbor harvests 4 hens off of his property, that may have a localized effect on your turkey population. And so by reducing the bag limit to 2, we're not reducing that much opportunity because we know that most people don't harvest 4 birds.
Yeah.
But in the instances where it does, that may have a localized effect. So that's kind of the thought process as far as that goes. And
yeah,
then
I'd add that over the last 2 decades, as we've seen an increased participation in archery deer hunting, a lot of the fall kill has been that opportunistic take during the archery season.
That's what we talked
They're
about.
not out there intentionally intending to hunt turkeys, and so now we're killing more turkeys in the fall as part of the archery season than we are the fall firearms turkey season. And so part of that really is trying to balance that, protecting the long history that Missouri has and the rich tradition of fall turkey hunting, and still providing folks the opportunity, but then trying to minimize some of that really what is opportunistic take and not quite as intentional.
Yeah, I saw a graph online where it was like in the 70s, it was like 50,000 fall firearm harvest or something like that. And the graph just goes down, down, down. And as it goes down, the archery graph kind of went up a little bit. So I found that fascinating. I just, not knowing that history. I mean, I've always heard of guys like Ray I talking about the fall season and how much they loved it and meant to them. But I just never really experienced that, other than like what you've talked about, the opportunistic, hey, we're archery deer hunting and here comes a turkey.
Which is never the same. Like it's never nearly as fun as it is in the spring when you're specifically calling to them. They're gobbling back. They're coming. Like it's not the same thing.
Yeah. The
if you're sitting in a tree, fall turkey hunting is pretty darn cool, right? So when as a kid, my dad enjoyed fall turkey hunting. You find those groups, you go bust them up, and then you call them back to you, right?
Yeah.
And so it can be pretty exciting. It's a pretty cool opportunity, and it is one that like you guys said, that has been around Missouri for a long time. There's a number of other states that have had kind of more recent fall seasons that don't have that strong tradition, dyed in the wool kind of core group of folks that are really passionate about it. And so, we've certainly seen some of those fall opportunities come off the board in some places, but I think it is one that, we don't have a strong amount of evidence suggests that our fall harvest is significantly impacting the population spread across the state, right? If you look at the relatively few number of birds, but like Nick said, locally there certainly could be some impact.
Sure. Is there revenue implication then if if they want to buy their fall tags while they're archery hunting? Is there an increased revenue then for turkey conservation in that?
Yeah, there potentially is. We don't know how many folks who are purchasing their fall archer's permit will go ahead and purchase a fall turkey permit for that opportunity, or how many will just say, hey, I really am just deer hunting. So yeah, we'll just have to follow that out through time and see what happens.
I was going to ask you guys if you've modeled like what you feel like the decrease in kills and harvest will be during the fall with this new regulation, how that will affect the overall number of turkeys that die in a year. Like, is it a couple percent difference, or I know you don't really know, but I'm sure you guys have probably modeled it, haven't you?
Yeah, probably not to the extent that you're imagining. What we do track is things like hen harvest rate. So we've had projects in North Missouri and then down in the Ozarks that look at what percentage of hens are legally harvested in a year using band recoveries and even radio telemetry, birds with radio telemetry equipment on them. And that's declined, right? So as our fall harvest has declined since the late 80s, so has our hen harvest rate. So I think in 1987 was our peak fall harvest, and it was around 28,000 birds compared to this last year where it's 5,000 birds. So that's an 80% decline. And we've seen our hen harvest rate in particular decline from around 4%, a little over 4% to right around 1%. So, the decline in participation is likely the bigger driver there as far as the number of birds being harvested. I don't think that the changes we made this year are going to have a huge impact on that bottom line number. It'll be between 5,000 and whatever it is next year. I don't think that that's going to be a big difference, especially whenever you consider how many birds we used to harvest during the fall.
Yeah,
sure. If you guys are okay with it, I'd like to pivot a little bit and talk about non-resident hunters. And, you know, one of the things that I see all the time and or hear, you know, chatter wise is like, we should have a reciprocal fee for non-residents because it costs us a fortune to go hunt all these other states and even turkey tags. Like, it's expensive to go hunt Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, you know, and there's draws now and all kinds of things. And so what goes into that thought process? Because we have one of the most affordable whitetail and turkey non-resident tags, I feel like. And I just wonder, you know, are there any discussions internally regarding that?
There are always discussions. That is probably, you know, one of the most controversial topics we have to deal with on a regular basis is what's the appropriate amount someone should pay for the opportunity to harvest a deer or a turkey in this state, and especially with the increasing pressures that we see in neighboring states, right? The increasing permit fees, the decreased opportunities, the increased draw systems. I think most of us are non-resident deer and turkey hunters in some other place too, right? And so I hate the conversation, quite frankly, because it's pitting each other against each other, you know, and but it is a tough one, and we continue to look at what balancing that looks like, right? And so we've made some permit price increases on non-residents, and will likely continue to do so as we continue to adjust permit prices with inflation. But I think we're continually watching and monitoring what proportion of our hunting public is made up of non-residents to try to balance that. And to this point, yes, we have some places that get hit pretty hard, you know, that have noticeable pressure from non-residents. But when we have done surveys and asked those non-residents where they're hunting, they're pretty well spread out. You can certainly see, you know, for deer, you know, the top 2 tier counties across the Iowa border, right? You can see disproportionately higher, you know, non-resident participation there. The rest of the state, it's really pretty uniform. Folks hunt where they've got a place to hunt. We also see a very high proportion of our non-residents that have some sort of strong family-related connection back to the state.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a bit of the balancing point too, right? It's folks who have family and own land here who are coming back, you know, to use that opportunity to chase deer and turkeys. And so it's a challenging one. And I don't know that anybody has, you know, the secret sauce as to how you're supposed to go about setting non-resident permit prices.
It's got to be a tough balance, because not only do you have them coming in, but you also have all the kind of associated dollars that they're spending while they're here that are good for local economies. Sure.
And that's probably you guys take a lot of heat in regards to, you know, they're doing this for the money, they're doing that for the money. Like, it's not really a fair assessment, I don't think, but I think that's a very narrow lens that a lot of folks look at it. And it's like, they opened up all day hunting, and it's going to draw on a lot more non-resident hunters. It's all about, you know, getting an increase in revenue for the tags. But then you think about, it's like, well, or you could just increase the non-resident tag price, you know, but then you guys, like, the consumer wants you, the resident wants you to increase non-resident tag prices, but yet they're kind of knocking you, saying it's a money grab for an all-day season because they think it's going to attract more non-residents. So I don't know. I hear you. It's a tough spot to be in, and obviously you can't make everybody happy. In fact, you guys probably can't hardly make anybody happy. So that's a tough job to have.
If you do.
It is a tough one, and the work of conservation is expensive. I mean, that's the reality of it too. You know, to have a team of biologists and researchers that are are doing habitat work, that are managing public areas to maintain public use, that are protecting the resource, right? Are more than 200 conservation agents. And so all of that money to continue to provide those opportunities to the public, it's not lining anybody's pockets, right? That's the frustrating part of it. It always seems like it's in the context of lining somebody's pockets. And that's just simply not true. We try to do our best to actively manage habitat that provides, the best hunting opportunities and protection and management of the resource. And we spend as much or more on private land, than probably any other state in terms of trying to help landowners meet their management objectives. And so that all costs money to make it happen.
Yeah. So guys, I'm curious, what is the kind of the debrief for the analysis after this season? How quickly will you get data? How quickly will people know what the results are? And then what does that look like in terms of a timetable for maybe changes, if any, for the 2025 season?
Yeah, we'll have harvest data, the day the season closes. I think I get those reports turned around typically with that week. That's always the ambition. As for the survey, it goes out after the season closes, so it usually takes a while to get those survey data back. But that's another big component of this is we're going to try and track hunter satisfaction, which is one of those other things that states have made this change that they've also tracked, and they didn't see any declines in hunter satisfaction, which gave me some that's positive, right? That's a good sign. So we'll continue to look through that. I'm always very reticent to make always, as if I've been doing this for decades, but I am fairly hesitant to make yearly changes. I think the kind of the whipsaw effect is unlikely to, you'll never be able to see the effect your change has if you're constantly making changes. So I don't anticipate we have big changes coming up for 2025, though. Never say never. But yeah, I mean, I'll try and get those reports and those data, submitted as soon as possible. That's always the ambition.
I always find it fascinating how quickly the reports come out. I figured it's because of the app. Like, the Missouri the app that you guys have is really easy to use, and it's pretty nice to have out in the field to not only tag your, animal right away, but then do the confirmation there right away. Like, I don't know. I find that to be very convenient.
It beats the days in which we had paper data records and everybody had to go to in-person checking, and then we had to send them to a massive facility where an army of folks hand entered all that information. So yeah, it certainly makes putting it back in front of our hands a lot quicker. The online survey tools too, right, for the public. So many of our postseason hunting surveys are now, run through an online system, which gives Nick and others a lot quicker access than the mail-based surveys, which we had to wait to get in. We had to get them scanned. We had to verify that they scanned appropriately. And so that all helps speed up the process. But I'd go back to, kind of Nick's point of, not being reactionary and making changes next year, because unless something absolutely that we couldn't even imagine happens as a result of the change, you really do need to take a 3 to 5 year snapshot to really level set where things are and what happened to sort of avoid where we started the discussion this morning, right? The recency bias, right? It's like what happened yesterday is what influences my prediction as to what might happen into the future. And so we will absolutely be watching this very, very closely and monitoring the wide range of things that we've talked about, from impacts of the population to impacts of the quality of the hunt, impacts on hunter satisfaction, as we determine whether we maintain this approach or we do something different.
So I wonder if the changes to the amount of time a person can hunt during spring turkey season now, if that influences any of the conversations around the duration of the youth season, because a lot of people have said, oh, it's so short for the time window for kids to get out there and kill something is so tiny. Is there kind of an increased opportunity now because of the timing of the new regs?
Yeah, I think so. And so Eric Edwards, our hunting and angling marketing specialist, will be spending a lot of time really digging into what are the implications to this on permit buying patterns, on participation, on helping Nick dig through the surveys from the hunter base side and say what were the implications? Have we started to see some increased retention? That's a big one that we're talking about. We always talk about recruitment, right? Like trying to get a hunter to hunt the first time, but they're not really recruited, right? They're not recruited until we retain them for several years and get them to continue to participate. So we'll look at, lapsed hunters. We've got a pool of folks who haven't hunted in the last 3 to 5 years that we will monitor and track and see if this did bring them back, if it provided some additional opportunities. So we have a lot of tools to look at, what the implications of this is on hunter behavior and participation.
Because the drop off can be pretty steep, right? After they age out of a youth season and maybe they get into the school sports or
TikToks,
college or whatever it is. It's just, they come back to hunting, a little bit later in life. Isn't that kind of the case a lot of times?
Yeah, you can see that. I spent a bunch of time digging into the demographics of our hunters, and deer and turkey hunters fall into the same sort of boat. When we gave or provided the youth seasons, the youth portions of those two seasons, we've seen pretty big spikes in that 7 to 14-year-old sort of age group where somebody takes them hunting. But then you guys are right, they drop way off. And they don't come back. They really don't in any substantial way. There's a small portion of them that come back. If you go prior to that and you look at what's the real recruitment of that age group, post 11 when we had the season that had to be 11 to hunt, those folks that participated then tended to stay a little bit longer. Again, this is partially generational, but we do not, while it's exciting to get a youth hunter out there for the first time, many times we don't actually truly recruit them unless they're part of a family or have some other broader support network around them that creates that. Yeah, we all get busy. Or some of us get busy and take a bit of a pause during that time in life where you're going to college and you're starting a family and then come back to it. But some of those were quite honestly massive assumptions that were made based on looking at the data kind of in a inappropriate way, to be honest.
Does, in your opinion, the loss of, the privatization of land, the loss of habitat, so we're kind of diving out of just turkey talk into overall, discussion here, but has that been the biggest detriment to hunters over time, like hunter recruitment? Like, is there a carrying capacity for the amount of hunters that we can have because of leases, privatization of land? Like, there's only so much public access. Whitetails, I thought I saw something recently, like 89 or 90% of, no, it was like 92 or 93% of hunters hunt private land for whitetails across the country. But yet the thing you hear most about right now is public land hunting, and guys like the Hunting Public have done a great job in promoting that. And that's part of it. But, is there a carrying capacity as hunters that we've maybe hit our limit?
Access is right up there as like the most significant challenge to recruitment and retention of hunters. There's no doubt about it. And I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword. We've become far more protective of the private land hunting opportunities. Folks tie up land, larger chunks of land for a smaller group of individuals than we probably ever have before. Just anecdotally, the stories of, the grandfather who has a farm that used to have, a dozen folks that hunt on it. And now he doesn't allow anyone else to hunt on it because his grandson may or may not come. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So those are real stories that we hear. And there's no question that access is one of the most significant barriers. And you don't get access by knocking on doors anymore. Mm-hmm. I used to be able to go just about anywhere, knock on doors, and maybe 1 out of 10 you got permission, but you'd get permission. Now that's super, super challenging unless you find just the right spot. And so yeah, there's no question that's a reality. And I think part of it for what they want out of a deer hunt, right? And the protectiveness they have around their deer herd and their deer population. There's good or bad. It just comes with consequences, right? And I think one of those absolutely is access to private land.
There's some cultural implications too. I mean, just going to someone's house anymore is so different.
Dangerous.
Dangerous. You got to bring them a pie. There's a lot of, it's just different than it was back in the day. So going to do that door knocking is like, oh geez, am I really invading someone's privacy? Am I going to put them off just by my sheer
Nobody
presence?
wants to answer the phone, much less the door.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes it tough. Well, it's certainly an interesting caveat to our discussion, and I think one that we could probably spend a whole different podcast on. I do want to, probably not today. Like I would love to have you guys back on and dive into the whitetail side as we get closer to the whitetail season and talk about, the increase in firearm opportunities, the CWD, regulations and what you guys have been doing there. Like there's a lot of hot topics there, and I'd love to dive into it, but it's probably a totally separate podcast. And then that'll give you guys a chance to prepare for it too, because that's one thing, that we hear a ton about. And I think it'd be worth going into.
We could have Nick back on as the turkey biologist talking about whitetails.
Yeah.
Like, guys, this is not my department.
Well, Jason Isabel, our current deer program leader, was previously our turkey biologist. So you guys can grill him on some turkey questions when we do that. But no, I sincerely appreciate you guys always being willing to reach out and ask the question, say, hey, what's going on? Really get through some of the misconceptions of where we are and why we're doing it. And I think I'm super excited, to be quite honest, about the opportunities we're going to provide to some additional Missourians to hunt turkeys all day, especially when we truly and honestly believe that all the data suggests that we have very low harvest rates on our gobblers, that we can sustain it, that we think that there shouldn't be impacts to the quality of the hunt. And so we see declining participation. We have to ensure that our regulations aren't standing in the way unnecessarily of folks having the opportunity. And with the challenges everybody faces, right, with the decline in hunters, the increased distractions and the amount of time that free time that folks have to get out and enjoy nature and pursue one of the coolest birds. I think it's, sort of our responsibility to make sure that we're providing those opportunities, and just appreciate you guys again giving us the opportunity to come on and tell a little bit of our story.
Well, Jason, not to open up a whole new can of worms, but I have to ask, with Sarah Parker Pauly, the director of the Department of Conservation, announcing her resignation, what's the latest on that front? Like, what can we expect for leadership for the MDC in the future?
Yeah, so we're all kind of heartbroken. I think Sarah's been an absolutely incredible ambassador for conservation, not only in the state of Missouri, but across the nation. And she's just a phenomenal leader, and has moved us as an agency through some tremendous change. And as we look back over her 8-year tenure here at the department, I think she can walk out the door feeling really proud about the things that she's done, the position she's put us in to move forward into the next era. The commission is actively in recruitment for a replacement for her. So they're doing a nationwide search, as they should. And I think the plan would be later this spring for them to conduct interviews, and hopefully by late spring, early summer, they'll have a new director on board. So we're certainly looking forward to that transition.
Any interest on your part for that role?
Uh-oh. He put you on the spot.
Put me on the spot, right? I'll tell you, it's a tremendous role, and with it comes a tremendous amount of responsibility. And I think anybody owes it to themselves to ask the hard question if they think they're ready for it. It is not for the faint of heart. Mm-hmm. I will tell you.
Yeah,
the lifestyle.
I've watched her for the last 8 years run hard and run fast, and the work is broad and it's diverse. And it takes the right special kind of person to do that and do it effectively. And so we'll see what happens. I haven't completely made up my mind as to what I'm going to do, but I certainly appreciate that folks are at least willing to ask the question if I have interest. I take that as a bit of a sign of respect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, take it as a compliment for sure.
Well, I think
I'm not interested. I don't think.
No, that was my next. That was my
Yeah.
next.
Okay. Well,
Stay
thank
where
you.
you're
Yeah.
Nick knows his lane.
yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for hopping on. We really appreciate it. We look forward to just continuing the conversation.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, appreciate you. Have a good day, and look forward to another great spring safe turkey season.
Gobble, gobble.
All right. I think that's enough for today, Tim.
I think so too.
All right. Until
it
next
down.
time, everybody. Peace out.
DeerCast is now supercharged with maps. Get ahead of your game with killer new features like live Doppler radar, wind check out to 5 days, virtual rain gauges, GPS path tracking, and more. Plus, get our 14-day revolutionary DeerCast prediction and access to DeerCast Track. Prep, predict, and pursue with DeerCast.
We're adding new videos every week, so make sure to click that subscribe button and check out all of our amazing content. This episode of DoD TV is brought to you by DeerCast. Prep, predict, and pursue your target buck.